Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Sunday, April 17th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 139 days. The game against Michigan in 223 days. On Saturday at Ohio Stadium, right behind us, we got to watch the Ohio State spring game, which is obviously the 15th practice of spring practice, kind of the culmination of spring ball for Ohio State, and always just a nice day to go out and enjoy a little sunshine or a little light rain and gray skies, depending on which time of the day you're talking about, inside Ohio Stadium. My guest today is a gentleman who I watched that spring game with. His name is Kevin Noon. He's the host of the Big Me Kickoff podcast. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Where else would I be?
That's a good. You are contractually obligated to be here, so that's the best kind of here to be. I wanted to talk about. We did a long post-game show with Tony Gerderman for the Buckeye Weekly live show, instant reaction show after the game. I wanted to kind of frame this a little differently. Talk about 6 guys who really kind of stood out to me in the spring game. And, you know, there was, I think, six guys who really kind of popped to me in terms of being like very positive news. There was a little bit of bad news. We can talk about that at the end. But let's start with the good news. JT Tuimoloau, this is his first spring at Ohio State. And you kind of heard throughout the spring, like, hey, boy, now that he's had a chance to work with Coach Mick in the offseason and now he's had a chance to go through spring ball a little bit, it's like, oh, boy, it's starting to come together for, you know, a guy who was ranked the #1 player in the nation, regardless of position by some folks. It sure looked like, boy, that might really be coming together.
I mean, let's not forget, last year he didn't commit until 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
And then he didn't enroll until the last second, and then he still made it onto the field. So what's he going to look like when he has a little bit of seasoning? Well, he's starting to get a little of that seasoning, and and it's a spicy dish. I'll say that. He may not have the benefit of going against 2s and 3s the way he did at certain points, but it really didn't matter who they put in front of him. I mean, he was just a handful. I'll be interested to go back and watch the tape and kind of see some of the things he did technique-wise. But for everybody who had really bad feelings about how the defensive line looked last year in some regards, I think that there's some things to be very hopeful for.
Yeah, and I mean, this was a very basic defense. Ryan Day and Jim Knowles both talked earlier in the week and earlier in the spring about the fact that they were not going to do anything really exotic. It was going to be a very vanilla defense, and you still, they're not bringing blitzes. They're not, walking guys around the field all that much. It was just kind of like pass rush, one-on-one, who can beat who, and he wasn't always going up against DeJuan Jones. He wasn't always going up against Parris Johnson, but like it looked like someone who is not necessarily going up against someone who's necessarily going to be in the NFL draft conversation. He looked very just dominant throughout. He has the potential to be a real disruptor this fall. Second guy I want to talk about, true freshman, and I mean Kai Stokes, man. Like it felt like we're sitting there watching the game, and it was just like you kept hearing his name, like they kept announcing his name, making the tackle, breaking the pass up. He was always there. For a true freshman to be a safety and kind of always be around the ball and not also have the, well, he was just being, he was being too nosy and that's why he was always around the ball and then he got beat deep. Like, you never had the negative side of that. It was just, he was always around the ball, always making plays, and first guy to lose his black stripe. Like, there's a lot of this that just looks like, oh boy, they might really have something here.
I looked up his number no less than 6 times during the game. I'm like, who is this guy? What's going on here? And let's not forget, safety is a new position for him. He's only played it for a couple of years. He comes out of Sefner, Florida, Armwood High School, the same school that produced Brian Sneed. So he played in a program that had a lot of dudes. He had really good opportunity to learn under a fantastic coaching staff. Now he comes to Ohio State. And this kid has such a high ceiling. He has so much ability, and he's still trying to figure it all out. Well, obviously, in this figuring it all out, he's done enough to lose the black stripe. And then, just messing around out there on the field at Ohio Stadium, he goes there and he's legitimately in the conversation for who could be a defensive MVP in the game. So I think it's only going to get better. His path to the field this year may be blocked a little bit. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to be tremendous on special teams, and I think we're going to see him because Ohio State's schedule is not exactly its most difficult schedule from year to year. So I think we're going to get a chance to see him get a lot of really good seasoning. Getting back to that, I guess I must be hungry or something. We're going to see some good seasoning along the way this year, and I think he's going to be a real force come year 2 and year 3.
Yeah, when you're leaning on a true freshman to be a safety, that's not usually a great thing for your defense. You go back through some of the years when they've had a true freshman out there at safety. I always think of like Donnie Nicky in 1999. Like Donnie Nicky ended up being a great safety for Ohio State, played in the NFL for a million years. Was the free safety on that 2002 national championship team. But like 1999, that you're asking an awful lot to put a true freshman in that kind of role. If you don't have to do that with Kai Stokes, that's great. That's only good news. And they do feel like they have depth there where they don't probably have to do that. But you're right, Arkansas State, Toledo, Rutgers, there are going to be games where you're going to have an opportunity for him to get some meaningful reps this fall. Another guy who is going to get some meaningful reps this fall, and maybe even more meaningful than Kai Stokes, is Jordan Hancock. Second-year player, top 50 recruit last year. He didn't come in until the summer. Now you look at Denzel Burke. Why was Denzel Burke out there and Jordan Hancock wasn't? One of the reasons is probably that Denzel Burke was in last spring. Denzel Burke was playing in the spring game last year. Jordan Hancock was still home, so he came in over the summer, a little bit behind because of that, and then ends up not playing a ton. He was like 3 games on defense, 3 games on special teams, but he was another person you heard good things about this spring, and then maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias, but it was like every time I saw Jordan Hancock on the field, he was doing something good.
Yeah, and I think we had a lot of questions of who is going to be the next guy to emerge. Is it going to be Jordan Hancock? Is it going to be Ja'Kalen Johnson? Well, from what we saw in this one event today, 1 of 15 spring practices, advantage Jordan Hancock. And that, there's still going to be an opportunity for everybody to try and sort things out. We talk about guys that have a little bit of a block in terms of what it is that they're going to be able to do based on the guys in front of them. Jordan Hancock is going to deal with a little bit because of Denzel Burke, because of Cameron Brown. But let's not forget that Cam Brown has gotten a little banged up during his career. I think there's still going to be the opportunity for them to roll some guys in and out. I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a Kerry Combs-esque, if we got 3, we're playing 3. But I think that we could still see a situation because why? I mean, if you think that highly of Jordan Hancock, you need to play him at some point, because if not, you're just going to have just this really small window if he's that good.
Yeah, and you have him, you have J.K. Johnson there, who we could have been talking about him as well. He had a pretty solid day as well. They have the talent there. You want to get these guys ready because this is going to be Cam Brown's last year, almost certainly. I don't know if he technically has another year after this or not, but you would certainly figure this, if he's healthy, this is going to be his last year. You got to get those guys ready for next year. And if you can play them and you can get them reps, even if it is a lot against Arkansas State and Toledo, if you don't want to do the rotation thing, you're going to get a lot of reps this year. And both of those guys look like they are going to be up to the task this year. Last guy on defense, this is someone we did the whole hour of Buckeye Weekly and didn't actually, I don't think, mention his name. Noah Potter. Noah Potter was someone who he had a million injuries last year. He had injuries, and then he had a situation with his eye where he had to have surgery in his eye and miss the rest of the season. And we didn't see him for quite a while, to the point that it was like, we don't think we've seen Noah Potter yet. And then when Noah Potter got on the field, it was late, and it was, you know, he's not going up against DeJuan Jones, but I think he had a couple sacks, and he might have drawn a holding call, or he was just he was a really disruptive force. And I don't know how much that translates this fall. Maybe he worked his way up the depth chart a little bit today on Saturday, but more than anything else, it was just really nice to see Noah Potter out there and making a difference on the field.
He's somebody that I had people asking me, is he either in the portal or is he on the path to medical retirement because of just the injuries and the eye issue? And then lo and behold, 97 trots out there and does some things. And, we even got a little small shrug, it looked like, at one point when he was out there. And yes, it wasn't against the ones, but for somebody that people had already figured had been recruited over, this, that, and the other, to go out there and to have some production points, I think that speaks huge.
Switching over to the offensive side of the ball, a couple guys. First of all, Evan Pryor. He's the third string running back. We sort of is the assumption right now. He was, he had a big play on the ground for a touchdown. He had a big play through the air, like he ran a wheel route, and Devin Brown threw a little behind him, or he might have had a second touchdown. I don't know. They're not probably expecting Evan Pryor to be the starter this year, but if you get to the point where Evan, if the other two guys are unavailable, or one of the other guys is available and he becomes a split time kind of back, if that's the role he has, whatever it is this year, it feels like, okay, last year he was too little. This year, he looks like he could be a real contributor to this team.
Well, they always talk about a pair and a spare. That would be three.
Mm-hmm.
Trevion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and then Evan Pryor trying to hold off everybody else in that position. I mean, Marcus Crowley seems to be still kind of a long-term injury. I mean, we saw him. He was dressed, but, I mean, obviously he didn't go. I mean, it sounds like something that could drag on for a little bit. Dallin Hayden has not enrolled yet at Ohio State, so the opportunity is there. And with where Ohio State's recruiting is in terms of future classes at running back, you better stake your claim now while you can. And I don't think Evan Pryor did anything to hurt his case. I think he did a lot to add to his case. And I think one of the things that sets him apart from a lot of other backs nationally is his ability to catch the ball. And I think that's one of those things that really differentiates him from a lot of other backs. So I think it's huge. And if he does fill in and have that body type to be able to be more of a active participant, I think that's going to be big for Ohio State.
And, I think all through spring, I've kind of viewed him as like the equivalent of Michigan's Donovan Edwards. They have the kind of bigger back in Mayan Williams, who's maybe like the Hassan Haskins, and they've got the speedier back, who's kind of like the Blake Corum in Trevion Henderson, and you can mentally sub in the rich man's or poor man's there to whichever of those descriptions you want. It has felt to me like Evan Pryor could be that Donovan Edwards type back where you swing the ball out to him and out of the backfield, and he's making guys miss in space, and that is one of those guys who has the 68-yard touchdown against Maryland because there's no one on their defense that can defend him in space. So yeah, we'll have to see, but yeah, I think he if anything earned himself more playing time, more reps, and more carries and receptions this fall. Last guy I wanted to talk about on the positive side of things, Emeka Egbuka. The numbers weren't huge, but it just felt like he was just constantly getting the ball, and he only finished with like 4 catches and 39 yards, but he just looks like he's ready to seize one of those starting wide receiver jobs.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for him. I mean, obviously, I think people are going to remember more of what Jackson Smith-Njigba did in terms of one of his catches where I'm still not really quite sure if he caught like the back third of the ball or what happened there. But with Emeka Egbuka, with him having the number change, the roster, the numerical change, I had to kind of think about it because there was another 12 running around out there for somebody else. So I'm like, what's going on here? But as I slowed it down, I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, he's having a pretty solid game. And with we didn't get to see a ton of Marvin Harrison. We didn't get to see Julian Fleming. This was a huge opportunity for Egbuka to stake that claim. And again, not to sound like a broken record, I don't think he did anything to hurt his cause. It'll be interesting to see, do they move JSN outside to keep Egbuka inside? I mean, what are they going to do there? But again, these are great problems to have. These are first world problems. It's not a situation of we don't even have enough guys to go empty. I mean, Ohio State's got just this wealth of riches.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Julian Fleming there. That's one of the things on the other side. Julian Fleming, we were kind of coming into this game thinking, man, he's finally healthy. You finally have an opportunity to see what he can do on a big stage like this. He played in the Rose Bowl. He had a touchdown in the Rose Bowl. He had a nice game, but he didn't have the 3 touchdowns that Marvin Harrison had. He didn't have the 300 and whatever yards that Jackson Smith-Njigba had. And he was dressed, and then he didn't play. He just had a little tweak, and they didn't play him. He and Court Williams were kind of in the same boat, and these are not long-term injuries. These both sound very much like this is the spring game. It would be really stupid to run someone out there and not have them be able to get, and risk a more significant injury when the upside is, well, you got to play in the spring game. But both of those guys, Court Williams and Julian Fleming, were both kind of like guys I was looking forward to seeing, and it was a bummer for them that they didn't get a chance to potentially put on a show in front of the fans on Saturday.
Well, the thing is if these guys have had 10, 12, 14 of the 15 practices to put stuff on tape, okay, it's disappointing for the fans not to be able to see this, but guess what? They've had several scrimmages. Every practice, once they get out of shorts and shells, I mean, they're going to scrimmage during the practices. So they've got the stacks and volumes of tape. So don't look at it as, oh, this giant, huge missed opportunity for these guys. Unless they're hiding stuff from us that we're unaware of. These guys have had their opportunities. They just were not able to showcase it on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's that goes to one of the reasons why they kept the spring game defense so basic, because they have the tape from all the closed practices that they can teach off of, showing all of the more exotic looks and the different packages and all that kind of stuff. There's no reason to put that on BTN for Notre Dame to DVR and be able to scout off of. So they kept things a little basic for that reason. And the last thing, every coach's first goal coming out of the spring game is just let everyone be healthy coming out of the spring game. There was only one significant-ish looking injury, and that was Mitchell Melton, defensive end. He missed all of last year with an injury, came out, was a linebacker, came into the spring and started playing that kind of rush end, that jack spot, and it looked, there were a couple of plays where he looked like, oh, he really is coming on. You kind of heard good things about him in the spring. He looked like a guy who, okay, they weren't just talking. They really, he really was coming on in the spring, and then went down with what looked like a knee injury. We don't want to speculate on the severity of the knee injury, but he didn't come back. If that ends up being more than just a little minor tweak, that just, for someone who just had to go through a long thing, that was kind of a bummer. But if he is able to go this fall, you saw enough from him that it was like, okay, there really is something there for him in this role.
Right, and we don't know. And I mean, it could be something very simple. It could be just a little tweak. It could be a little bit of a sprain, or God forbid, it could be something worse. And sometimes you worry about a guy who's come off of a long-term catastrophic injury before. I mean, how do they respond to something else? So we're just going to have to see. But yes, he does have a lot of stuff on tape, it appears, in his move to the jack position, which will one day be called the Leo again. We're sending out, positive thoughts that it's not going to be something significant, but at this point we really don't know.
Yeah. So that's something we'll probably hear from Ryan Day or Larry Johnson a little later on this week. We're expecting to hear from kind of all the assistant coaches a little later on in the week to kind of do a little bit of a spring wrap up and catapult us in towards what is the true off season. You kind of went from the regular season to the bowl season to recruiting season and winter workouts, and then spring ball, and it ends in the spring game. And now it's like now we got like 6 weeks. It's going to be a little more a little more relaxed. This is coach vacation season is coming up in the next little bit. We will probably, this may be your last Sunday morning scoop for a little while. We are probably going to be shifting to a 5-day week schedule, at least until we get back into a more Big Ten Media Days type content season. We will have plenty, though, of course, to talk about as recruiting. Didn't even touch on the recruiting in today's show. We will have plenty with our recruiting guys this week. We will have we head into camp season pretty soon. We're only 5-6 weeks away from camp season, which is always a lot of fun and a lot of fun stuff to talk about. So we will have lots of fun stuff to talk about on shows coming up later this week and throughout the summer. So thank you guys all for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed our spring game coverage. Had a good, fun post-game show with lots of good questions live on our YouTube channel. Fun pregame show with the same. It was we really appreciate everyone who is participating, who asked us questions. Makes those shows a lot more fun when we're not just talking to ourselves. So thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.